Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Howland. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for VC3. I'm here today to talk to you about cyber liability and some things that you can do for your organization to both reduce your risk and prepare for an eventual cyber incident that may occur. Um, the cyber landscape changes on a daily basis. It is ever evolving. The attacks are ever evolving. The defenses are ever evolving. And it's really important to stay ahead of the game and really stay educated on what's going on. So these are some of the things we're going to talk about today. First of all, why is this important? Why does this matter? These are the scary statistics that I almost don't like to present, but that I think they are critical for people to understand. First of all, that first statistic, $6 trillion expected to be spent by the end of next year as a result of cybercrime. This isn't money you're spending on your security solutions. This isn't money you're spending on antivirus or patching programs. This is money spent on an actual breach that occurs. This is ransomware payouts. This is fraudulent wire transfers. These are recovery costs after an event. $6 trillion. That is a lot of money. Secondly, we want to maintain customer confidence. What can we do as organizations to make sure that our citizens, the businesses in our communities, have confidence in us to protect them? Every week there's a new municipality in the news that was breached. It's not a good thing. It's not a good trend. You don't want to be the next news story that is disclosing that your water billing system was breached and your customer records were lost. We don't want to be part of that statistic. We want to try to protect our customers. And finally, it's not just our organizations and our citizens that are impacted, it's our employees. There's definitely been a disturbing trend lately that goes directly after our employees' pocketbooks. And that really is in the nature of convincing an organization to redirect direct deposit, attacking payroll systems, redirecting money out of payroll systems. We're seeing a lot of this, and that's scary because now it's not just me as an organization that's impacted. My employees are impacted, and in several cases we've seen the organization didn't even know this occurred until an employee was calling them and saying, hey, how come I didn't get paid this week? And so we've really got to put protections in place to make sure that we're minimizing these impacts that are shown on this slide. The last scary statistic I want to talk about, and this one is just so important and it's going to play into the rest of the presentation. 95% of the successful attacks over the past 2 years have started in email. The hackers, the bad guys, the malicious actors, whatever you want to call them, they aren't going after your firewall. They're not trying to breach your systems. They are going after your employees. It is very difficult to hack your way through a well-configured security system. It is trivially easy to type up an email to convince somebody to click on a link that is going to have devastating consequences. So that statistic is so important because we've got to be doing more to protect our employees, educate our employees, and make sure people understand the risk of phishing. Phishing is not trivial. Phishing is not just spam with advertisements that we want to ignore and we don't care about. Phishing can be used as a basis of an attack on your organization. You're probably already aware of that, but that statistic really nails that and really shows how critical that is to understand. First of all, some trends we are seeing. Cyber liability insurance is going up. We're seeing premiums increase. And this is the result of a couple different things. First of all, there were more breaches and more payouts in the first half of 2020 than all of 2019. So the insurance carriers are having to pay more money out of their pocket. So of course they're turning around and trying to collect more on the premium side to make sure they remain healthy. Secondly, really the providers are very wary of the increased risk due to remote workforces. During COVID, many of our organizations sent people home. Municipalities did, but private organizations did, but that added the risk to the risk of a cyber attack because when our employees are working from home, they're outside of these carefully constructed security boundaries we create at our organization. So that has got the carriers a little bit scared that there's going to be an increase in claims this year, and they've already seen it. Having said this, even if you are looking at a insurance renewal and you're seeing an increase in premiums, please, please, please recognize cyber liability insurance is still incredibly valuable. Do not forego it because of that premium increase. If you absolutely have to, look at changing the coverages if you really need to keep your costs contained, but please do not forego your cyber liability insurance plan. It is important to you. And we're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. Next, let's talk about the evolving threats. So, if you go back a few years ago, we started seeing lots of ransomware attacks. And what was happening is an attacker was getting into an environment, and they were immediately kicking off and starting a ransomware attack. So the attacker would get in, and typically within a few minutes, the organization would start seeing signs that somebody was in their network. They'd start getting messages from their file server saying this data has been encrypted. They'd start seeing those ransom notes pop up. And so you had a very rapid notification and very quick awareness that something was occurring in your environment. Well, that has changed. The attackers, again, have evolved. They are no longer getting into your environment and simply kicking off a ransomware attack. Now they're getting into your environment and they are looking for important data of value, whether that's credit card numbers, whether that's social security information, whether that's PHI, you name it, whether it's just information they can use against your organization. They're trying to find information of value. They are also trying to figure out what your defenses look like. What are your antivirus capabilities? Do you have monitoring capabilities? How are your backups structured? What can I do in this environment to make my attack as effective as humanly possible? Right? They're really laying the groundwork for a much more sophisticated attack in the future by hiding in your environment once they get there. So that top statistic there, that over 200 days average dwell time, what that means is that when an attacker gets in, the average now is that they are in your environment for over 200 days before they make their presence known. This gives them all sorts of opportunities to extract data, figure out your defenses, and plan a very, very targeted and very sophisticated attack. Once they start that attack, once they've got all that information figured out, or if they think they've been detected, they're going to start the attack, they're going to start ransomware. So what do we need to do to try to prevent this? Well, first of all, again, that's 95% of the successful attacks started in email. So we've got to do a better job of training our employees, helping them understand how significant phishing is, helping them recognize what a malicious email looks like, training them to look at every single email suspiciously, even if it comes from somebody they know. Am I expecting an attachment from this person? If not, I need to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I just got an email from you. Did you just send me something? Before they open it. Not clicking on links in email unless they absolutely know it's safe, knowing how to identify those things. And we don't just need to train them on this, we really need to exercise these skills as well. And that comes through the phishing simulation platforms. Send them test phishing messages that you concoct, that are created by the platform, that tell you who's clicking on the links and who's not, who's paying attention and who's just clicking on things. And now when I know, okay, I've got an employee who really just wants to click on those links in an email, I can go have a conversation with them, right? I don't want this to be punitive. I'm not telling you should fire them, but certainly just use it as an opportunity to track who is falling for these things and how can I better educate them? Because again, 95% of the successful attacks started in email. So let's work towards decreasing that number and make sure people aren't clicking on those links that come into their messages. Secondly, we have got to improve our detection capabilities. If you look at the NIST cybersecurity framework, NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They have a whole framework built around cybersecurity. There really are 5 components to that framework. Most organizations live in 2 of those 5 arenas. They have protection, right? They've got antivirus, they're patching their servers, they've got firewalls in place. That's great. That's one component of the NIST framework. And many organizations have recovery processes in place, right? They've got a DR plan, they've got backups, they've got cloud-based backups. So if something happens, they're confident they can recover. Okay, that's 2 parts of the NIST framework. One, most of them are skipping the identify, which is what is it exactly that I'm trying to protect? And they're definitely skipping the detect. And what detect allows us to do is find that guy that's been sitting in our environment for 200 days. Find that person that's looking around and poking around my environment. So when we increase our detection capabilities, we dramatically increase our ability to stop that person from sitting in there figuring out our environment and making that sophisticated attack. We need to know that they're out there. And there's new detection technologies out there that that increase our capabilities in this area. So, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. But we don't just need to detect our employees through the phishing awareness and the training, we've also got to protect our environment, and these detection capabilities help us do that. All right, so as always, cybersecurity is about layers. It is about putting layer upon layer upon layer of protection in place. And that top thing there, we cannot rely on passive protection. We really cannot just install antivirus and assume it's going to do the job anymore. We've got to be more active in the ways we are protecting our environments. Now, I'm not going to bore you. I could talk probably for hours about the different technologies and the different things you should be doing as an organization. So I'm just going to hit a couple of highlights here. First of all, multi-factor authentication. Please, please, please institute multi-factor authentication. If you are using Office 365, if you are using G Suite, any cloud solution you are using, put multi-factor authentication in place. What MFA does is it protects you from that stolen credential. So many of those phishing messages we get, when the user clicks on a link, they're presented with what looks like an Office 365 login or a G Suite login, or whatever application, a Wells Fargo login, right? And they think, oh, this is legitimate. I need to give this to see this document or see whatever it is that this person sent me. I need to provide my Office 365 credentials because I have those. They type them in, they click enter, something happens in the background. Maybe the window closes, maybe they're presented with a document, maybe not. They just think, whatever, okay, I don't know what that was about. They have just inadvertently given their credentials to an attacker who is immediately going to use those credentials and log into the environment. I don't care how complex your password is. If you give your password away, the complexity is irrelevant. Multi-factor authentication is one of the best protections against that, because now I've got a prompt on a phone, or I've got a key fob that has a key that I have to put in when I go through that authentication process. So even if I give my credentials away, if the attacker doesn't have that second factor, they can't log into your environment. So that is incredibly important. If you have cloud-hosted solutions, ask the vendor, is MFA an option here? Penetration testing. We've got to test our environments. We've got to know how our defenses are set up, and are they working properly? I talked about that these guys get into the environment and they sit in your environment and they spread and they look for stuff. A security organization doing a pen test can really replicate that. And they can see, okay, can I move laterally from machine to machine? Can I get domain administrative rights? Can I find sensitive data in the environment? And if I can, how am I doing it? Because the testing guys are doing the same thing that the attackers are. They're using the same weaknesses. They're using the same holes. So when you have that penetration test done, now you're going to get a report that says, here are the things you need to fix. Here are the gaps you need to close, so that even if somebody does get into your environment, the amount of damage they can do is minimized. It's not just about technologies though, right? We've got to train our people. We talked about that already, but we've also got to have policies in place. We've seen so many news stories about these very large, fraudulent wire transfers. And I'm talking about millions of dollars of wire transfers because somebody concocted a really clever email. They looked at a municipality's contracts. They figured out they had a big construction project going on, and they convinced somebody in the organization that they were part of that construction vendor, and that they wanted to get paid a different way this month. And somebody sent literally $750,000, over $1 million in wire transfer funds, right? We can't do that. We've got to have a policy in place that says, hey, anytime there's a request to modify a wire transfer or an employee payroll direct deposit, those have to be validated. We can't just get an email and go, oh, okay, yep, I see, I recognize this person's name, let me go ahead and do that. I've got to pick up the phone, I've got to call the person that I know at that other organization. I've got to make sure 100% that this is a valid request. When my employee sends me an email and says, can you please redirect my deposits to this account? No, you need to come in and stand in front of somebody in finance, stand in front of somebody in HR, put the request in, give them the number, sign off on a piece of paper before we make that change, right? Put those policies in place to protect yourself. Use your PO policies. If somebody's asking for a payment, or somebody wants, if your city manager sends an email to the finance director and says, hey, I want to engage this vendor, please pay them this amount of money. The finance director's first response should be, I'll generate a PO, and when you approve it, I'll go ahead and pay the money. It shouldn't just be, okay, just by rote, I'm going to pay the money, right? Use those policies to protect yourself. Log file retention is another one that I think goes largely overlooked and is so important. You know, our servers, our firewalls, most of the systems we have pretty short retention of their local log files. And if an attacker gets into one of these systems, they can wipe those log files out. Those log files are critical for us understanding how an attack occurred, how somebody got into our environment. They're critical for us to recognizing that somebody is in our environment in the first place, right? So we've got to protect those log files. We've got to copy them off. We've got to store them someplace where they're protected, where they can't be deleted. And if I do go back and I see, wow, somebody's been in my environment and maybe they've been there for months, I've got to have months worth of log files so I can go back and see how that occurred. If I don't have those months, I'm going to have no chance of figuring out how they got in. So we've got to protect our log files so that we can do that forensics analysis on the back end of an incident. Endpoint protection. I'm going to lean on this one a little more heavily in a moment, so I'm going to skip that point. But really, we've got to ramp up the level of our endpoint protection. And this is never a popular one. This is not new, but it is so important. We've got to limit user rights on PCs and laptops. We cannot make everybody administrators on their machines. I know nobody likes that. Everybody wants to be able to install whatever software they want, whenever they want. But unfortunately, when our users click on those links that download malicious software, you know, if they have full admin rights to the machine, a lot of damage can be done. If they have limited user rights on the machine, that minimizes the amount of damage. Doesn't mean it can't be catastrophic. Doesn't mean it can't still give somebody access into your environment. But again, layers here. We want to minimize the risk. So we've got to stop giving our users full rights to their machines. We've got to limit their capabilities on their machines. So again, so when they do click on that link, when they do download that malicious software, maybe it can't actually get installed in the first place. All right, so I said we're going to talk a little bit more about endpoint protection, and this is what this slide is about. So there's a new category of endpoint protection out there called AEP, or Advanced Endpoint Protection. Really, this is almost like antivirus on steroids. What AEP platforms do that differs from antivirus? Antivirus works from the idea of, I see an executable, it's either good or it's bad. If it's good, I'm going to let it run. If it's bad, I'm not going to let it run. That's how AV works, right? It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. However, what happens when the attacker runs something that's good? This is a good executable, but it's doing bad things. AV doesn't have a chance, right? Because traditional AV products look at that, they say, that's good executable, that's fine, I'll let it run. And now the attacker is often doing whatever they want in your environment. They're leveraging known good tools to attack you. What the AEP products do is they say, okay, this executable is good, but what is it doing? What is the behavior? How is it acting? Is that executable reaching out to the internet to download something that may be malicious? Is that executable trying to scan the machine to try to find credential sets? Is that executable trying to elevate credentials on the local machine? Right? All of these things would be bad. Is it trying to disable my antivirus software or other protection mechanism? Right? AEP will say, okay, yes, this is a good application, but the behavior is bad, so therefore it will stop it. Right? So this is very important because the bad guys are now using known good tools to attack you. When they get in, that way they can fly under the radar. They can go underneath your AV because your AV thinks, hey, everything's fine. No, they're running things in the background that are bad, that are malicious, that are dangerous to you, but they're doing it in the context of known good executables. So these advanced endpoint protection platforms really can do a better job of finding these and stopping these kinds of threats. And this is CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Carbon Black, Cylance. That's just a few of them are out there. There's lots more. But these programs are a much more sophisticated protection. They go way beyond AV. So I really encourage you to look at those platforms and add those platforms to your environment. Second, the next bullet here, endpoint detection and response. All right, endpoint detection and response is really AEP, but with a 24/7 security operations center monitoring the activity. Right, so maybe I install a tool like SentinelOne or CrowdStrike, and it's running on my machine. And yes, that threat kicks off, and yeah, it does a great job of recognizing it, quarantining it, stopping it, but that's it. It's done, right? It's done its job. Well, what these EDR platforms do is they have that same capability, but now I've got a human being on the other end that says, wait a minute, that was an attack. That was a potential attack. What do we need to do to make sure that machine is clean? Not just stop the attack, but how do we clean up from it? What do we need to look for around it on the network to make sure that it doesn't spread to other machines in the environment, right? So now I've got to bring that next layer of intelligence to my AEP platform. So now I have a directed response, not just this automatic tool that's doing its work. And then managed detection and response is really like EDR, but it's at the network layer. So instead of an agent running on each machine, now I potentially have a network appliance that's watching all traffic going in and out of my network, that's watching the traffic going to the DVR that doesn't have an agent, or the HVAC control system that doesn't have an agent. Maybe those systems are getting attacked. We wouldn't know it because they can't run those EDR tools, but the managed detection and response at that network layer can start seeing that kind of traffic. Ideally, a really good, robust solution is to have both EDR and MDR on the same network. The tools work together. The SOC, the Cybersecurity Operations Center that stands behind those, now has more information to work with, more information to look at to prevent a potential incident and to contain an incident when it starts. So this really amps up your endpoint protection and is a really good solution to have. Finally, what do I do when I am attacked? Because unfortunately, the statistics show that no matter how much you spend on cybersecurity and no matter how much you train your employees, if somebody wants to get into your organization, chances are they're going to. We cannot ensure, we cannot get 100% guarantee that we will never be breached. So what do we need to plan for when we do get attacked? First of all, time is of the essence. The faster we, first of all, the faster we detect an attack, the better off we are, right? Back to that 200+ day dwell time. We don't want the attacker sitting in our environment, so we want to find them quickly. And then the faster we can respond to a potential attack, the more we are going to limit the impact. When that attack starts, you don't have time to sit around and question, okay, what steps do we need to take? Let's scratch our heads and figure out what do we need to do? Okay, this is what we're seeing. How do we stop it? No, that all has to be thought out ahead of time. And that's really where your cybersecurity incident response plan comes in place. If you don't have one, I encourage you to contract with a security company who has experience in this area that really can help you develop that plan. Because what those plans are going to do is they're going to look at you as an organization, look at your biggest risk points, look at your communication paths, but they're also going to look at the most common types of attacks. Here are what these indicators are. Here are the things you need to do to stop it, right? And we want to have this thought out ahead of time so when that attack occurs, we can immediately respond. The faster we respond, the less impact the attack is going to have. So let's have that cybersecurity incident response plan in place. That way, when the attack occurs, we are responding quickly, we're mitigating it quickly, it's going to minimize the impact. And frankly, when we go to the public and we say, hey, we were subject to a cybersecurity attack, here is all that happened, we were able to contain it quickly, you look like heroes instead of looking like the schmuck, right? So I really do encourage you to have this incident response plan in place. Secondly, you've got to have, and these next bullets should all be part of your cybersecurity incident response plan, but one, we've got to contact our insurance carrier. Most of the cyber liability carriers have an incident response hotline that you can pick up the phone and call, and you're immediately going to get, or not immediately, but very quickly, you're going to have an incident response professional guiding you through the process of responding. You still need your own plan, but now I can get on the phone. I can get a professional who knows exactly what steps I need to take to contain. These are security guys. These are people who understand and have seen this stuff day in, day out. They know how to respond, right? And they can be on your team very quickly because you've got that cyber liability plan, because you've got that insurance policy. Part of the reason I want to make sure that you maintain that policy, right? So now I've got my incident response plan. I do have detected that there's definitely an incident going on. Now I've got professional guidance on how to react to it, how to act to it. of course, we're going to want to tell our IT team and our IT provider, right? And that's probably going to be the first thing that occurs, candidly. But we've got to make sure they're aware, that they know. And this means anything that looks suspicious. I've got an employee that clicks on a link in an email, and the link doesn't, something happens, but not what I expect, right? They need to be picking up the phone and calling IT and saying, hey, I just clicked on a link in an email and something odd happened. Can you please look and make sure that either whatever it is that they sent me didn't work, or is this something bad that's happening in the background, right? We've got to tell our IT team quickly. We've got to tell our IT provider so that they can start looking at things. We've got to engage law enforcement, and that's both your local law enforcement, because cyber attacks are a crime, right? We need to report these things. We need to get our local law enforcement involved, and we've got to let the FBI know. The Internet Crime Complaint Center really should be a pretty quick stop on your response to an incident to let them know, hey, this is occurring. Now, that is further down the line, right? We got to get the insurance carrier involved. We got to get that incident response team in place. We've got to get IT involved. We got to mitigate. We got to contain. We got to stop the active attack. But shortly after that, we want to let the FBI know. We want to let law enforcement know, because what the FBI is going to do is they're going to take this information. They're going to probably collect data from you, and they're trying to amass evidence, right? And they're trying to figure out how these attacks are occurring. And then they're propagating that information out to organizations so that they can better defend themselves. And ultimately, ideally, they might even be going after the malicious actors themselves and shutting them down. Now, if they're in a foreign country, obviously that's very difficult for the FBI to do, but that is what they are trying to do. So we want to equip them with information and knowledge so they can help on the back end and stop this from occurring repeatedly. One other thing that recently was highlighted by our federal government is simply the fact that they reminded everyone recently, and this was a few weeks back, that if the FBI or if a national agency is investigating one of these foreign entities that is responsible for cybercrime, it is illegal. It is not lawful for you to pay them money. And so what they were saying in this notice was, if you pay these malicious actors, these big malicious actors money, you may be breaching our federal law and you can be held liable. And that could be whether you're an insurance carrier or a bank or even just privately sending money to these people. I don't know that the federal government will do anything with this. I don't know that they will actually prosecute anyone. They may be just really trying to remind people that this is illegal. Paying money to these people is illegal. So that's just something to be aware of. And I just have that knowledge in the back of your head. You still need to engage your insurance carrier. You still need to engage law enforcement. It is critical that you bring them into the conversation as quickly as possible. Don't let that fact scare you. You may not have to pay them. If you've got a good response plan in place, that money may never have to leave your pockets. But let's be aware of that. Still engage your cyber liability insurance carrier. Still make sure law enforcement gets engaged quickly, and really let's try to contain these incidents. That's it. This is really high level, and I'm almost sorry we don't have a lot more time because there's so much to cover when it comes to cybersecurity. There's so many ways to educate you. However, this is what we've got time for today. I hope you found this valuable. Please go to vc3.com, learn some more. Feel free to send us an email, pick up the phone and call us if you have questions. Thank you all very much. I hope you have a great day.